Merci beaucoup, Monsieur David. Donc, pas seulement la France a continué le bon travail de la Corée, mais elle se lance sur 3 dossiers très ambitieux, peut-être que vous les avez remarqués, mais peut-être Monsieur Hahn a un premier commentaire sur ces 3 ambitions françaises, sur les difficultés peut-être rencontrées. Je cite donc la réforme du système monétaire international, sachant que vous n'avez pas parlé de l'histoire, enfin précisément de l'histoire de la référence au dollar comme monnaie de référence, l'histoire des matières premières, du cours des matières premières qui est très clair, et puis de la gouvernance globale qui est là au domaine plus politique que de gouvernance mondiale. On est en plein sujet dans la conférence. Vous avez peut-être un commentaire?
Merci beaucoup pour votre question, mais je pense que je dois répondre en anglais parce que mon français n'est pas assez bon. Donc, c'est un avis pour l'interprète. Well, as a matter of fact, I think there are different ways of looking upon how France is approaching its presidency. And I think you could call it either revolutionary or evolutionary, in the sense that, well, you just said that there are 3 new issues that the French presidency is introducing. And then, in that sense, you could be saying that it is revolutionary. But at the same time, as somebody who is basically very, very conservative, I think that it is more evolution rather than revolution, in the sense that, well, for example, international monetary system. We have been discussing all the related issues anyhow at the G20. And then, as I told you, the global financial safety net, well, is the kind of system, if you really look deep into the issue, is the kind of problem which cannot be resolved completely without large number of us, not only G20 countries, but non-G20 countries as well, to think very seriously about what we should make out of the international monetary system we have had for the past 60 years. I will not go into all those details which has been shared with us by Jean David, but at the same time, I think there is much interest and then much idea abroad with respect to this subject, and I think France, among other countries, would be one of the best countries to be taking up this issue. And then I think we can say the same thing with respect to the second as well as the third subject, in the sense that volatility in the commodities market, it has been there. And then, as was rightly pointed out by Jean David, then of course there are, well, many different aspects to the issue. The market of the products itself, or the financial market, etc., etc. And then, in fact, beginning from Pittsburgh Summit, we have begun to look into this issue. And then in Pittsburgh, what leaders agreed was to deal with subsidy in the energy market, fossil fuel market. But at the same time, again, it's an issue which is very closely related with the volatility in the commodities market. And then lastly, with respect to global governance, then if it is not about global governance, then G20 would not be there. So I think the France is introducing the issues, which in my view is evolutionary, and then I have to say very timely. And then given the experience as well as the kind of capacity that the France has as a nation, we have very high expectation about French presidency. And then we are very glad that Korea will be provided with an opportunity to continue to work closely with France, and then in particular, Monsieur Levitt, whom I admire a lot.
Thank you very much. Joe?
In my business, which is daily journalism, we pay particular attention to the idea that timing is everything. And the Seoul Summit comes at a moment in which there's going to be a lot of discussion internationally around financial issues, and very urgent financial issues. You very rightly pointed to the credibility that the G20 has to establish. And I think much of the world, and particularly many of my colleagues who will be in Seoul, will be looking at the question of how does the G20 address the problems we face today of hot money pouring into developing countries, a flood of U.S. dollars on the market as a result of the expectation of quantitative easing by the Federal Reserve. I wonder how you will come out of the summit able to say we have maintained our credibility on the financial instruments of the day. I wonder if you could talk about the concept of what you will do to restore or establish international credibility for the G20 on these issues.
Well, thank you for the question. Back in Seoul, a large number of Korean citizens are asking me, what are we going to make out of Korea's hosting G20 summit? And then, as a matter of fact, some of them are blunt enough to ask me, what in dollar terms would be the benefit of hosting G20 summit in Korea? And then my answer to them is this, which is that, well, before we think about the tangible benefit, dollar term benefit of G20, let us just try to ask ourselves this question, which is, what was the economic cost of financial crisis we had in 2008, September 2008? Well, as a matter of fact, if there is one thing which G20 process has meant so far, it has been to restore stability in international financial market as well as international economic in the international economy in general. Well, look at some of the issues that G20 has been dealing with for the time being. For example, macroeconomic coordination, reform of financial regulation, reform of international financial institutions. Well, put them all together. Yesterday there was Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and then he said, let us just to connect all the dots. And then on the paper we have all these dots, macroeconomic coordination, reform of financial regulation, and the reform of international financial institutions. If we connect all these dots, at the end of the day, I think the outcome will be more stability in the international market, in the international economy. So that, I think, would be the best benefit that we have obtained through the G20 process so far. And that is something we try to continue to get from the process through the G20 Seoul Summit meeting as well. But at the same time, with respect to more specific questions you have just mentioned, like the hot money flowing to the emerging markets, and then flood of dollar in the market because of quantitative easing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's a reality that because of the difference in the interest rate, then some of the money is finding its way into the emerging markets, and then one downside of quantitative easing would be flooding of dollar, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, we are talking about policy mix in the sense that there are a large number of problems we should be addressing. And then in addressing those questions, then from time to time, we will have to employ fiscal measures. From time to time, we will have to employ monetary measures. From time to time, we will have to introduce more measures in order to stabilize the financial market, et cetera, et cetera. But all in all, let us just think about two different scenarios where each country introduces its measures in order to address those problems they have with its own mix of policies, on the one hand, one scenario. Second scenario where we have G20 countries representing 85% of world GDP, just look in the eyes of other officials and then try to coordinate their fiscal policy, their monetary policy, their financial market policy. Between two scenarios, which one would you choose? That's the question I have for you. Which scenario would you choose? I think the answer would be obvious. So whatever we do in Seoul, I think if we can make a contribution in that direction, then we'll be very, very happy.
And I wanted to ask you on